Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. Can I just say it feels so good to be back. I have been going through some different transformations in life, so I've been trying to get used to this whole new routine, but trust me, I have missed so dearly filming. This video has been a long time coming. It's the part 3 of my Houses with Chilling Backstories series. I've done part 1 and 2, so if you haven't checked those out, please go and do that before you watch this final one. I have 3 houses that I'm going to do, and then there's one bonus house that I'm going to do right at the end of the video, which won't go into too much detail. It'll just be kind of a brief overview of this case. Before I start, guys, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and don't forget to like and comment on this video and leave any suggestions that you want me to do down below in the comments. Guys, just a disclaimer that all pieces of information that I'm going to be talking about today I found on the internet through news articles, documentaries and news reports. So I understand that not all pieces of information will be 100% accurate, but I've done my best to provide as accurate information as possible. And also guys, just a trigger warning, this case is intense. There are a lot of gruesome details, a lot of graphic and gory details that may be distressing to some people. So if this is not your thing, please click out of this video right now. I've got a lot more lighthearted content that you can watch. And also guys, all my videos, all my true crime videos are for educational and awareness purposes only. Okay, so the first case that I'm going to be talking about is a man called Dennis Nilsen. This man lived at 195 Melrose Avenue in Cricklewood in North London. This apartment is a 2-bedroom apartment. It's in a fairly quiet street, like not much really goes on there. Some would kind of say it's quite boring to live in this street. Yeah, some people might say that not much goes on, but a lot has gone on. Dennis was born in 1945 in Scotland. He was a serial killer and was into necrophilia, and he murdered at least 12 young men between the year of 1978 and 1983 in London. I think he had like abandonment issues or something, because he would keep the bodies of his victims inside the floorboards in his apartment room. So he was like collecting these bodies in his house and kind of kept them as like souvenirs. And yeah, it's just really gruesome to say the least. He would keep these bodies for like weeks at a time inside his floorboards. He would also do like sexual acts on these bodies before dismembering them and then burning them in a fire behind his apartment building. He would also boil parts of his victims' bodies, and then sometimes like bits of their bodies that were smaller, he would try and flush them down in the toilet. Some of his victims were killed at this specific address, and some he actually killed and also stored in his home in Cranley Gardens. Dennis was the middle child. He was quite an adventurous kid, but he was also quite quiet. His parents split up in 1948 after the 3rd child came along, and he was very, very close to his grandfather. Dennis referred to his grandfather as a great hero and a protector, and he has a lot of memories with his grandfather being in like the Scottish countryside and just having like really, really beautiful times with his grandfather. His grandfather was a fisherman, and unfortunately in 1951 his grandfather's health started to really decline. However, he continued to work as a fisherman, and one day while he was at sea, this was in 1956, he actually died from a heart attack at the age of 62. After this, Dennis became really, really withdrawn and even more quieter. Like, he just couldn't get over his grandfather's death. He never really fully recovered because he was so close to him. So it was just like that first death that he had that was so close to him, and he was devastated. He stopped partaking in like family activities. He didn't really want to talk to anyone. He wasn't really like affectionate with anyone in his family anymore. He was quite close to his sister, so he would play games with his sister, but otherwise he didn't really get along with anyone else. He didn't really want to talk to anyone else. In fact, his other siblings got a lot more attention from everyone else, like his stepfather, his mom, his grandmother. So he resented that everyone else got more attention than he did. arrested. During puberty, Dennis realized that he was actually gay, and he was going to keep this hidden from his family because he was actually quite ashamed to be gay, and especially back then, people just didn't widely accept homosexuality. So he decided to keep that to himself. Something odd to note as well, he would be attracted to men that resembled his sister. Because of this, he started like sexually abusing his sister on some occasion, and he would also do the same with his brother as well. And then later on, his brother realized that he was gay, and he would kind of torment Dennis, calling him a girl and just kind of teasing him. So Dennis came from a poorer family compared to his friends, so he was ashamed of that as well. So he never really invited his friends over or anything like that. And because he felt so much shame, at the age of 14, he left to go into the Army Cadet Force to escape his home life. Even in the army, he hid his sexuality. He would sort of like go in the shower when no one else was there because he didn't want to be caught like checking out other men. And even in his fantasies, in his sexual fantasies, he would start kind of fantasizing about his colleagues. The thing with his fantasies is that he didn't fantasize them being like alive and like participating in consensual sex. He would imagine them to be like unconscious or even dead. When him and his colleagues would drink together, he would pretend that he was like more drunk than he actually was, in hopes that one of his colleagues would like make sexual advancements towards him. And he would also use paintings of like dead people, kind of using the paintings as pornography material. His first ever sexual experience was with a female, and it was a female prostitute. And he said that it felt really depressing and he did not like it at all. And he also said that it was overrated sleeping with a female. So after being in the military, he moved back in with his family. And this is where Dennis's older brother told his mother that he was gay without Dennis's approval. And after this, he never spoke to his brother again and kept very, very minimal contact with his family. After this, he decided that he wanted to be in the police force. So he moved to London, and he did this for 1 year before deciding that it wasn't for him. And then after this, he went into being in the security, and even this he didn't enjoy. So he also resigned from being in the security because he really missed being in the military. He missed the military life, and he sort of started becoming like in this like downward spiral. So he started drinking, and he had several sexual encounters with men from the pub nearby, but he said that he never felt truly fulfilled, like he wanted something more than just a sexual partner. He said that having these sexual encounters, he was trying to sort of find some inner peace from this, but really it just kind of left him feeling really empty and alone and very used. He had a relationship and that didn't work out, but he was looking for something more meaningful with someone else. As life went on, he got into being a civil servant. And he was really good at his job. He was quite quiet at work though. People at his job kind of looked at him as a loner, saw him sort of as like an odd character. But in terms of his professional work, he was very serious about it. He would often volunteer to do overtime. And yeah, he really liked this job. So then in 1975, Dennis met a man called David. Soon after together, they moved into a flat at 195 Melrose. He said that there was kind of no like relationship, but I don't know, sources are kind of mixed because some say that he was in a relationship with him, some say he wasn't. So it's kind of hard to know whether he was or not. But after a while, Dennis asked David to move out. After this, he went on to have some failed relationships. And because they were failing, he saw himself as very unworthy of being in a relationship. In 1978, Dennis met this 14-year-old boy. So young. The 14-year-old boy was trying to buy alcohol, and then Dennis kind of talked to him and lured him into his house, offering him food and drinks. This 14-year-old boy accepted, and they went back to Dennis's house and they listened to music, they drank, and they fell asleep. So the next morning when Dennis woke up, he saw the little boy still sleeping, and he didn't want to wake him up because he didn't want him to leave. So Dennis did the worst possible thing and made sure that this boy never ever left. Dennis proceeded to strangle the little boy and drown him in a bucket of water. And when this little boy passed away, he went on to wash the boy's body and then placed him onto the bed where the corpse was just kind of lying there. And Dennis performed some sexual acts on himself while looking over to the corpse on his bed. And then he took the body and put it inside the floorboards, beneath the floorboards for 8 months. This body would stay there and rot and develop maggots, and it was just horrific. And after the 8 months, he then took the body and made sort of this bonfire behind his flat and burnt the body there. So then again, he lured another man in promise of intimacy, drinks and food. When the man came to Dennis's house, Dennis tried to strangle him, but luckily the man managed to escape. He told the police, however, he didn't go on to press any charges. His next victim was a 23-year-old from Canada. He did pretty much the same thing, lured this man in and then killed this man exactly the same way, strangling, that sort of thing, same way as he did with the first victim. And then after he killed this victim, he positioned the body onto the bed in different positions and took Polaroid pictures of this corpse. And then again, he wrapped his body and placed him inside the floorboards as well. And from time to time, he would take out this body and position it in an armchair and just watch TV with this corpse. So safe to say that this man really did not like to feel like he was alone. His next victim was in May of 1980, who was a 16-year-old boy. And basically he did the same thing and then ended up killing this boy as well and placed him inside a cupboard in his flat. And then he noticed that the corpse was bloating. So he took out the body from the cupboard and placed it in his floorboards. So basically he went on to do this to many victims. It was sort of the same process that he was doing, luring them in, feeding them, giving them drinks, maybe having sex, and then just killing them. So this went on and on for many years. Then his last victim was a 23-year-old man who he found unconscious because he had epilepsy. So what Dennis did was bring him back to his apartment and he called the ambulance, and the ambulance came and took him away. And then the next day he came back to the apartment to thank Dennis, and Dennis said, "Why don't you come in and have some food and drinks?" So he did, and he fell asleep on the sofa, and Dennis also strangled him and put him underneath the kitchen sink. So by this time in the floorboards, there were so many bodies at one time that because of the maggots and the rotting flesh, the whole apartment started stinking really badly, to the point where it was like just unbearable. And he would go on to spray like deodorant and insect spray and nothing worked. The smell was still just disgusting. So then for Dennis, the worst happened. The landlord actually contacted him and said, "I need you to move out because I want to start some renovations on this flat." And Dennis at first was like, no, I don't want to move out. I'm happy here. So the landlord was like, "Look, I'm going to give you £1,000 to leave. Can you please leave?" So Dennis accepted, and with all the remaining bodies that were in the floorboards, he took out the bodies and he would burn the bodies behind his flat in the bonfire. And sometimes he would like burn the bodies with a tire so that the smell would be disguised as like the rubber, the burning rubber from the tire, and not like burning flesh. So this is where he moved to Cranley Gardens and continued on with his murdering spree. So that 23-year-old victim with the epilepsy, that was the last victim of 195 Melrose Avenue. So he did the same thing. He would lure them in, kill them, dissect them, flush parts of like small bones and things like that down the toilet. He would also sometimes flush down parts of like organs and things like that. So then he wrote a letter to the real estate agent saying that the drains were blocked and it was becoming intolerable for him and every other tenant in the building. So the plumber came and he checked out the drains and he noticed there was like this flesh-like substance inside the drain. And obviously this man did not think that it was going to be human. Like he probably thought it was like, you know, uncooked meat that someone had like kind of flush down the toilet or something like that. So when he noticed this, he saw like small bones as well. He saw this as really odd. So he told his supervisor. And so Dennis was talking to another tenant about what was in the drains. And then Dennis goes, oh, it looks like someone's flushed down their KFC. And suspiciously the next day, when further investigation was to be done on the drain, magically, suspiciously, this substance was gone. However, when the plumber further checked other drains, he found another drain with the same flesh-like substance. So then the flesh was given in to the mortuary, and that is where they confirmed that it was in fact human flesh and human bones in those drains. They found like a hand and an eye in the drain as well. So they knew for sure that this was not, this was not an animal. So then the police went to Dennis's apartment to see what was going on. And when they entered, the odor was so bad that the police were like gagging. Like it was horrible, horrible, horrible. The police said, oh, we're here to see your drains. There's been an issue. And Dennis was like, why do you need to see my drain? And then the police were like, okay, well, we found human flesh in the drains, so we need to see what's going on. And Dennis was kind of like, oh, no, like acting as if like it wasn't him and stuff like that. And then the police were like, no, cut the crap. Like, we know what you've been doing. We know what's going on. Where's the rest of the body? And then Dennis confessed. He told them. He was like, yep, okay, it was me. And then he said that he'll answer any questions down at the police station. He was given a life sentence and he died in prison at the age of 72 years old in 2018. So not that long ago. 195 Melrose Avenue has since been renovated and it's been bought by a couple in 2016 for £493,000. The couple say, look, there's no traces of death. It's completely brand new. They don't really put their mindset in like, oh, so many people were killed and stored here. They've just kind of started fresh. The Cranley Gardens house was also sold in 2015 for £285,000. So that was the first one. Oh, so intense, so creepy. It's just unbelievable that things like this has happened and probably is happening somewhere in the world. Like, it's actually crazy that people's minds can go to such a place and it's not a movie. You know what I mean? Like, this happened. This was real life. You don't know who could be doing what in your street, someone it's just crazy to me. Okay, so the second house that I'm going to be talking about, this house you may have heard of because there was a Netflix documentary that came out of this. It's called The House of Secrets and it was the Burari deaths. Now this, oh my goodness, such an odd and weird and eerie case. I honestly still don't know what to make of this case. I'm still a little confused. So let me know after you hear about this what you think, because I don't know, it's still eerie to me. And when I watched this documentary, honestly, I couldn't sleep for like a few days because I was just kind of thinking about how weird and eerie and disturbing this case was. This home is located in Delhi, India. It's a 3-story home and it's located in Street 4 in Sant Nagar. So basically the family, they didn't live in all 3 of the stories. They just occupied 1 story. So in the other 2 levels, there were other people occupying this space. So it sort of was kind of like an apartment. Neighbors still say that when they walk past the house, they still get this like eerie, haunting sensation. And some people actually 100% believe that this is now a haunted house. This is the home where a family of 11 committed mass suicide dictated by a member of the family. Now, this could be like due to psychosis or something more out of this world, sinister, evil, spiritual, whatever you want to call it. So this home was occupied by 2 joint families. And so they occupied the first floor of this house. So there were 11 members of this family ranging from 15 years old to 77 years old. So there was like, grandkids, a grandparent, people in like their 20s, 30s, 40s, stuff like that. This family from the outside, they were so wholesome. They were so happy. They were so close to each other. Like nothing seemed out of the ordinary. You know what I mean? Like they were very respected people in the community. They knew a lot of people. They had extended family members. They had friends. So to hear about this case is just so bizarre. So one of the family members called Lalit Singh, who you can see here, he was into this kind of like occult ritual that eventually led to the family's death. And diaries that were written by Lalit kind of goes to show that he was the mastermind behind this whole thing. And it suggested that the family was, performing Hindu rituals to the gods. However, Lalit swore that the spirit of his dead father would come in to his body and possess him and speak through his body. So he could firsthand apparently communicate with his dead father's spirit. Now, Lalit, because of this, I don't know if it's like some psychosis, some weird he was hallucinating or something, but he said that when his father would enter his body, his father would tell him to write specific things in his diaries. He believed that he was channeling messages from his father. So his father would, I say this very lightly, his father would tell him to write about certain rituals in the diary that him and the family needed to perform to kind of better their lives, to end their pain, to end their suffering. And they needed to do these rituals in order to attain salvation. Now, at one point, there was an accident at Lalit's work. And because of this accident, it lost his ability to speak. So he was non-verbal for quite some time. It was a number of years. I think it was about 3 years where he was non-verbal. 3 years after this accident, his father passed. And when someone passes away in Hinduism, I'm Hindu, so I know how this sort of works. When someone passes away for about 10 to 12 to 14 days, I think it is, there's prayers. So Lalit and his family were doing these prayers for 10 days after his father passed away. And while they were in the middle of these prayers, Lalit's voice apparently just randomly came back and he started chanting the word Om. This was a shock to the whole family because they were like, okay, he hasn't been talking for years and randomly he's just started talking. So what's happening? So they really believed that the father's spirit was helping him to speak, or the father was in the room healing this man or entered his body and was speaking through this man. So they were like, oh my God, dad's here, dad's here. Someone even asked him, how did you get your voice back? And he was like, oh, my father came into my dream and told me to do this specific ritual and then I would be fine. So every night at around 9-ish p.m., the family would perform these kirtans. Kirtans means they would sing religious songs together. This was for about 10 to 15 minutes every day. And when it was that time of the evening, they would literally be like, oh, it's dad's time to come. It's dad's time to come. Meaning the spirit of the father who passed away, it was time for the spirit to come. So when they would sing these kirtans, these songs, they would believe that the father's spirit would be around and channeling messages through Lalit. In these diaries, when Lalit would write in these diaries, they had a very authoritative tone. He would literally be writing things on how this family needs to live their lives. And it would be very strict ways of living. This motivated an extreme lifestyle change, can't speak, for the family. So the family was getting really brainwashed by this. They really believed that the spirit of the father was speaking through Lalit and they needed to listen to the father and perform certain rituals to attain salvation. And they changed their lifestyle dramatically. So basically it was kind of telling them how to live their lives. And if they weren't going to live their lives like this, God wasn't going to be happy and they weren't going to be able to live a happy life. Now in the diary, Lalit wrote about this ritual called the Banyan tree ritual. There were strict instructions in the diary saying that this ritual was to be kept a secret from everyone. So performing this ritual, no one was to know about it, and it had to be performed very accurately. It also said in the diary that if they performed this ritual, that God would be happy and their problems would be solved. So the ritual was to go for 7 days, and after the rituals were completed for the 7 days, each member of the family were to hang themselves from the ceiling and in a formation that resembled the banyan tree. The family were to be blindfolded, gagged, and they had to keep their mind empty and focused when hanging themselves. It was also instructed that the elderly lady in the family, so the grandma who was 77, was to perform this ritual laying down because she was elderly, and in the diary it said that she was overweight, so she was the only one that was instructed to do this laying down. They were also instructed while they were performing this ritual of hanging themselves in this formation, they had to imagine that the branches of this tree was kind of like hugging and overlapping their bodies. And one member of this family was to stand guard and make sure that everyone was performing this ritual correctly, and to also make sure that everyone did actually hang themselves. And this is including the kids that were in the family. You know, the kids were forced and brainwashed to perform this ritual that they truly, with their heart of hearts, believed that was coming from the spirit of the grandfather or the father that passed away. On CCTV, days leading up to this ritual, the families were seen like carrying stools and wires to their home. So it is believed that these stools and wires were used in this ritual. So it kind of seemed like they were preparing. Each member of the family were tied to this iron bar in the ceiling, and they were blindfolded and their feet were also tied. It's also believed that Lalit and his wife bound everyone and tied everyone because their hands were basically not tied at all. It was tied, but it was very loosely, which they may have been able to do themselves, but their feet were not bound at all. So it is thought that they were the ones that kind of, you know, tied everyone because they didn't tie themselves in the same way that the others were tied. Before even finishing off this ritual, they even practiced. So it wasn't just like the day came and they did it. They rehearsed this just to sort of make sure that this was done accurately. It is said that maybe the family didn't actually think that they were going to die. But I'm not too sure how, because if you're hanging yourself and tying yourself up, it's most likely that you're gonna die. So that's not known. Whether they 100% knew that they were gonna die or not is still really not clear. The elderly lady, because she was to perform this ritual from her bed, she was strangled. So this kind of tells me that they all kind of knew that they were gonna die, because if you've just strangled someone, you can't really not either be severely injured from that or pass away from that. The bodies were found on the 1st of July in 2018. People still don't exactly know what happened. You know, the diary entries were found, and that is why all, you know, evidence that was found was pointing to Lalit. So either he was in a huge like psychosis, or, you know, some mental illness or something like that. Or some people believe that people can get possessed. I don't know. Like, it's really hard to know exactly what happened. Personally, for me, I just think this man had some severe mental health issues, and maybe he went in a downward spiral after his father passed away or something. Maybe he was even lying about his, you know, not being able to speak. I don't know. There could be so many, you know, situations out of this. You know, there's so many loose ends, there's so many like stones that have been left unturned, so it's just hard to know. The investigators were just kind of going by what was written on the diary. So in the diaries, you know, when you're saying to reach salvation, it means to reach somewhere else, somewhere more than just the physical world. Yeah, it's very, very difficult to know exactly 100% what happened, because everyone that was involved in this died. So there was really no way else of knowing apart from the diaries, and no one else knew about this. You know, like I said, the ritual was to be a secret, so no one else knew what was happening. So other extended members of the family were just as shocked as the rest of the world. The house now has different tenants, so it is occupied. However, the house does attract a lot of people just because they kind of want to feel like a sense of something when they go there. It's kind of that haunting adrenaline rush. And people do say that they feel this haunting, you know, feeling when they are there. But the owners of the building say that there's no such thing. It's nothing like that. It is also said that the bedroom that the grandma died in is still locked to this day. But I don't know how true that is, how accurate that is. Because I believe if other people are living there, you know, it's not a huge space. So maybe it is occupied, maybe it is locked, because if it's locked, that's super eerie, because obviously then, you know, there's something more that people believe that, you know, that's in that house still, like spirits. And from what I've also read, the rent is super cheap there. And as you can imagine why, not many people want to actually live there because, you know, India has a lot of superstitious people. So yeah, it is basically known as the haunted house. I honestly urge you, if you haven't watched this documentary, go and do that. But trigger warning, it's disturbing and it gives you this really weird feeling. So just take note of that. Okay, so this last house that I'm going to be talking about, plus the bonus right at the end of the video, is called the Larches. Now, this house was lived in by Minnie Dean. Minnie Dean. This is also one of the types of cases that you sort of make your own conclusion because there are a couple of differing sources. Let's just put it that way. So this home was a cottage that was occupied by Minnie Dean. It was a 2-bedroom cottage and Minnie actually ran a baby farm in this house. Now, it is said that over 100 kids came and went during this time in her business. It is said that there was about 9 kids that lived in this 2-bedroom cottage at any one given time. So that is a lot. How she fit that many kids in and also herself and her husband, I do not know. And it is said that this woman murdered babies for cash. This woman was the only woman that has been executed in New Zealand in all of history. This woman, she took infants in that mothers didn't want. Basically, this was like mid to late 1800s. Now, back then, contraception, birth control wasn't like widely available to everyone. When people became pregnant outside of wedlock, it was kind of like a shameful thing seen by society. So Minnie Dean opened up this business so that people could basically give their children to her in exchange for money. So she would basically kind of foster these kids. So she saw this as a massive business opportunity and she basically opened this business. Minnie was born on the 2nd of September in 1844 in Scotland. She was the middle child of 8 girls. Her mother passed away in 1857 when she was just a little girl, and sometime after that she actually moved to New Zealand. She sort of just appeared out of nowhere and she claimed that she was a widow of a Tasmanian doctor, so Tasmania being in Australia, and that she had 2 kids. Now, there's never been any like sufficient concrete evidence that she was married to a Tasmanian doctor or to anyone back in that time. Some people believe that she actually became pregnant outside of wedlock and she had those 2 kids outside of being married, and that she made up some excuse or story that she was married, but the husband passed away so that people didn't see this as shameful. So then she married a man called Charles. While being married to him, you know, both her kids they grew up, they got married, they moved on with their lives. So she adopted 2 kids. And the thing is, their financial situation was not good at all. Like, Charles had to declare bankruptcy. It was this whole thing. Luckily for them though, one of Minnie's aunties offered them money so that they could go and buy this property that was a 2-story property with like 7 to 8 bedrooms. There was a farm on that property as well. Like, it was a pretty big land. It was like 22 acres. It was going to be like sort of their next stepping stone into whatever direction. But yeah, because they didn't have money, her auntie offered it to them and they accepted. But soon after, their property, the house on the property, burnt down. So they were not having much luck at all. So then Charles built this 2-bedroom cottage known as now the Larches. Minnie would place adverts in the newspaper and she would kind of disguise the ads as like married, in desperate need of a child, wanting to adopt a child. And so desperate women who wanted to give their babies away contacted Minnie, and business was flourishing for her. So some of the kids she would take in, the parents or the mother would pay like 5 to 8 cents per week to have the child in her care, or they would just make a lump sum payment between 10 to 30 pounds. Now, like I said, there was like 9 kids at one time. Business was flourishing for her. Because of this, the house was in terrible condition. Unhygienic, disgusted, cramped. You can imagine, you know, like 10 people, 11 people in one house in a 2-bedroom home. That's not gonna work, especially if they're young kids. Because of the conditions of the house, kids were dying. They were literally dying. Now, some people think that she was killing these kids basically just to kill them and have more kids come in so she can have more money. Some people think that. Some people think that they were just dying from the conditions. Now, when autopsies were undertaken of these kids, of these bodies, it was established that they were well taken care of, that they were well nourished. So whether they were dying because of the conditions or she was killing them and covering her tracks, you know, making sure that she couldn't get caught in any way from malnourishment or anything like that, who knows? But when those examination reports came back, the kids seemed okay. So basically, she had to change the number of how many kids were allowed to be in this house at one time. So she reduced the number ever so slightly, but then continued with the house, the condition of the house. She didn't really fix anything. And so because she didn't fix anything and the conditions were not any better, just 6 weeks later, another little boy died under her care. And this sparked community outrage. People were horrified with her. And then again, another baby some years later died in her care. And in order to avoid the public outrage that she faced a couple years before that, she buried the body in the backyard so no one knew about it. The police were suspicious of her. So they watched her very carefully. Like, they were just like, why are there so many kids dying under her care? Something's not right. Now, on May the 2nd in 1995, a railway newsagent spotted Minnie Dean carrying a baby and a hat box onto a train. Now, on the return trip, the baby was gone. And when that newsagent of the railway saw Minnie carrying that hat box on the way back, it appeared to be very suspiciously heavy. And this kind of was like a red flag. Like, what is happening? Why all of a sudden the baby's not there and the hat box all of a sudden mysteriously appears to be heavy? Like, is there a baby in there? Now, in a 53-page statement written by Minnie Dean herself, said, "When I got on the train, I laid the child down on the cushions. She was asleep. Before boarding the evening train, she had dosed the child because the child was sick with laudanum, which is a common medicine that was given for kids who were coughing and things like that at the time. However, she apparently misjudged the quantity, the dose that she gave her. And now later on in the journey, in that train journey, she realized that the child had died. This is when Minnie Dean panicked. So that night she went into a hotel, took the body and tied it up, put it into the hat box. And she was seen carrying her purse, a parcel and the hat box, and boarded the train station as if nothing happened. So she was acting calm, acting normal, like nothing was wrong. But the railway guy saw this and was like, something's odd. Like, she came onto that train with a baby in her arms and now the baby is not there and the box looks very heavy. So he was suspicious. So his observation skills were on point. Now, because of this, again, like I said, the police were suspicious of her. So they went to her house and they searched her home. They searched her garden, and that is where they discovered freshly buried bodies of 2 babies and the skeleton of a boy thought to be about 4 years of age. And at the inquest, the older baby, who was a 1-year-old little girl, who was later identified as Dorothy Edith Carter, she was found to have died from an overdose of laudanum. There was also the other little girl who was identified as Eva. She was thought to have died from asphyxiation. The cause of death for the 3rd child was not established. Minnie Dean was publicly branded as a murderer. People believed that she killed these kids in her care. She killed them on purpose just to keep the business going. People thought of her to be this evil witch, basically. Witch with a B. In August of 1895, she was found to be guilty and she was hanged. Her time of death was 7:58 a.m. And like I said, she's the only woman who has been executed in the history of New Zealand. So the evidence must have been pretty severe for this to have happened. For the judge to have come up with this conclusion, there would have been very sufficient evidence against Minnie Dean. So this whole case actually inspired the 1893 Infant Life Protection Act. And it states, anyone who took in kids under 2 for more than 3 consecutive days with payment had to be registered as a foster home and were inspected by the police. Just remember that not all of the pieces of information on this case is correct, because like I said, a lot of it does get lost over, it's been over 100 years of this case. Okay guys, so now I'm going to talk about a bonus case as well. Oh my goodness, this case is like just crazy. So the person who lived in this next house was called Maury Travis. This house is located in 1001 Ford Drive in Ferguson, Missouri in United States of America. This home has 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. This house was built in the year 1954. And at the time Maury was renting it. It is said now that the mother actually owns the house, but I'm not sure if back then if she also owned it and he was just renting it out, or if she took ownership of it after everything happened. So Maury Travis was a 36-year-old serial killer who murdered between 12 to 20 women who worked as prostitutes in the early 1900s and early 2000s. He had fantasies about killing people from a very young age. It is said that he also killed pets, and apparently he also killed a neighbor's dog. He developed a very, very bad drug problem. He did go to school like he was in college, but he dropped out. He sort of just went in a downward spiral. He was spending $300 a day on drugs just to feed his addiction. So you can say it was really, really bad. Now, for a long time, even though he had fantasies about murdering and killing and that sort of thing, he didn't do anything for quite some time. He kept his fantasies, controlled, and he didn't do anything until he could no longer control it. Then in this house, there was a basement, and he pretty much transformed this basement into a torture chamber. Again, can't speak today. So basically he had all these devices, torture devices in this basement. He had a video recorder, and he would basically lure in prostitutes, offering them drugs and payment for their services, and he would record himself conducting sexual acts against their will, torturing them and abusing them and killing them. He would literally film all of this. He would bind them, he would gag them, he would also put masking tape over their face, and sometimes he would keep some of his victims there for days on end, kidnapping them and just keeping them there against their will before killing them and just discarding their bodies on the side of the road like they were pieces of trash. He would kill them by strangling them, and he got pleasure out of doing this. Now, he is one of the people that has been caught almost entirely because of his internet footprint. So basically there were people that were monitoring certain websites who would go on certain websites, and they caught him in this way. And he sent this letter to the police, and in this letter it was marked with like a map. There was a map in it with the letter X. And it was pretty much indicating where a body could be found. Now, he didn't write his name in the letter, but that is one of the ways of how the police found him. When the police actually went to this marked spot, that was on the letter, they found the skeleton of a woman. This was in the public eye now. People were wondering who this person was. They did not find him at this point, and they named him as the streetwalker strangler. So basically, when they tracked him down, the police went and searched his house, and he came out in literally like his boxers, and he was like, it's 7 a.m. Like, what are you guys doing here this early? The police were like, yeah, damn right. You know, it's 7 a.m. We're here for this. What's going on? They looked through his basement, and they found videotapes upon videotapes. They found blood splatters on the walls, the ceiling, the furniture, the carpet, and the walls had been painted over and over again. So he was trying to conceal the blood splatters. Apparently, there was a girl that was living with him, known to be his girlfriend. Apparently, she had no idea what was happening in the basement. She said that she never even went inside the basement ever. Like, she never had been down there. So she did not know what was going on. The police found his torture devices as well that he used. And when they watched these videotapes, they were absolutely horrified, to the point where one of the police officers offered counseling services to the other police officers that had watched the footage. In some of the footage that was found, the police say there was this woman who Maury had killed, and she was just on the floor. In the video footage, Travis was heard saying, "This is the first kill. Number 1. First kill was 19 years old. Name? I don't know. I don't give a F. First kill was nice." So basically he's saying, I don't care who this person was. I don't care who she was, what her name is. I don't care about the fact that she was even a human being. I enjoyed that first killing, so that's all that matters. That's basically what he was saying. Now, he confessed to the police to 17 killings, but the police believed that it was more like 20, but he didn't actually confess to 20. While awaiting trial, Maury was actually placed on suicide watch, so the guards had to check in on him every 15 minutes. On the 10th of June in 2002, 2 of the guards forgot to check in on him. So there were 2 of the intervals where guards had actually forgotten to check in on him. So Maury actually used this opportunity to take his own life. He hung himself in his cell. Years went by, and the home was rented out to a woman, and she had no idea about the history of the house. She had no idea that every night that she would be watching TV, right under her is where people were tortured, raped, and killed. Until one day she was watching a documentary on Maury and realized that she is living inside the 4 walls where these horrific things happened. She desperately tried to get out of this lease, but Maury's mother said, no, you have to pay the full term of the lease. She had to sort of see it through, but she was horrified that she was living inside that same house. Now, apparently in 2019, the house was sold, and the estimated price is $105,000 US. Okay guys, so that is the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I'm so sorry that it took me so long to film this. I'm so happy to be back filming. It feels like home. Thank you so much for watching this series. I wasn't sure if I was going to make it a series, but then I ended up doing a 3-parter. So guys, let me know if you want any more of these types of series, and if so, what types of videos do you guys want to see? Like I said, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It will help me out so much. Please guys, stay happy, amazing, and positive, and I'll catch you very soon. Bye.